Bright and rainy Monday morning here in North Carolina. So
Yeah, I think we're gearing up for some rain too. Definitely gray box day.
yes. Okay, well, let's get going. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah C. Gavagnoni.
Bringing you this week's Ascended World Collective Energy Share. And there's like so many things. We talked about this stuff on Thursday, and I think since Thursday, it's been 3 years. So we'll see where we go from there. Although the topic is sound. It's a really important one. We're starting about the fine lines. So first, let's back up, right? So first, we were dealing with a big collective wave of fear, right? That was what was going on at a very 3D level of the fear of the virus, the fear of dying, which is a big one right now.
Right. Fear of isolation.
All kinds of stuff.
Financial fears.
Oh, yeah. All over the place, right? So you got that. So that's been in place. We've had adjustments. We've had things. People are sort of settling to some degree, have settled into what
Acceptance,
yes. Well, right. What they believe is necessary. Well, so then what started happening, I think it was the beginning of last week, was another huge wave, though, because there's still fear, because it's still why there is acceptance is because of often the fear, right, of, oh, you can tell me what to do because I'm afraid, and if you promise you're going to make me safe,
right,
I'm dying, right, because then it goes, I posted about that the other day, right. But dying is our motivating, a motivating factor of being afraid of it and what happens after it, and being separated, isolated, alone, all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
So there's that. And so if that is unresolved within us, then on top of it comes a second wave as well, collectively. And it's all about like an anger that comes from the fear, right? And the anger started coming from what? From people feeling like, now you're taking away my rights. You're forcing me into a box. You're preventing me from being able to live the life that I believe I'm supposed to live. Right.
And I did all you told me, and I'm still afraid.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one too.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's like, no, I made these sacrifices in exchange for safety, and now I have the sacrifice and no safety.
Right, because it's still looming out there. Right.
Right.
And so, but then on top of it is oh, wait a second. This isn't what it was presented to be. Wait a second. When you get above the fear, right?
Right. Right.
And you step away and you go, the numbers don't really add up.
Well, and I sacrificed, so now I have the time to really analyze this, to take a step back and look at it and say, this isn't making sense.
Right. And when it says when you say this isn't making sense, then what happens is you're like, well, then you're lying to me. And you're controlling me, or trying to control me, manipulate me, or whatever. And so there is that. I mean, there are all these levels, and they are going on, and they are valid because of based on different fears and anxieties and all that kind of stuff. So what happens is now you've got two major layers going on of ego-based separation emotion, right? A fear, anxiety, and anger, right? And last week was rough because that kicked in like a tsunami collectively, right? You have both of that going on in different places, different ways. And then you have friction between the fear and the anger, right?
Right.
Sometimes the fear drives the anger. Sometimes it's to stomp it out, right?
Right.
And when we continue to go along the line of the egoic path of, oh, I have to stomp this out, right?
Right.
Then all we do is create another layer, right? Which then becomes more collectively becomes more draining.
Right. Exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, even just witnessing, not necessarily even participating, just witnessing the frenzy.
Well, And the bigger it becomes, the easier it gets, no matter how conscious you are, to get pulled into it.
Right. Right.
Because it becomes this big monster magnet, right? And even looking at it, you're like, oh, and you just sort of peek over the edge and you get pulled right into that abyss.
Right. And it comes from, well, you need to be part of this too, because there is only one right answer.
Which is ego.
Right.
Right.
Right. And of course it's mine, you know, so you need to be part of mine, or whoever is angry, you need to be part of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because there is no other perspective.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of, and now what happens is you've got so much motivated by fear and anger now, right? That then it seems like it's almost, this is where we've crashed before, right? I got this invitation this weekend, right? Is where we have gotten lost in it and then created an exaltation. Good morning, Gloria. We've created an exaltation, right, of something. Oh, I have the answer.
Right. Right.
Right. And it's going to force this. By the way, forcing anything, ego.
Right. Right.
It's going to make this happen, ego. You know, it's, and it's like, so the difference this time. So Nikki says the militia is literally taking up arms here in Michigan today. So crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of force.
Speaking of force. So it's this, so then we get lost in it, right? We're like, oh my God, then you become afraid of that, or you become angry about that. And that just increases, by the way, it increases egoic reaction.
Right. Right. Well, because it is rewarding and self-perpetuating.
Right. Well, because then we feel like we've accomplished something if we fought that battle, and we.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it gives you a purpose disconnected from yourself almost.
Yes. Nicole puts, what you resist persists, which is right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, but it's not that you allow. So here's the thing, and this is where everybody often gets tripped up. Many of us get tripped up. Is, well, if I don't resist, well, then I'm allowing, right?
Exactly.
And it's like, well, there's a difference.
Yeah.
From resisting to transcending.
Right. There's like a third choice.
Yes, the third choice is transcending.
Exactly.
I choose for this to not be in my reality. I choose to be in this other level of creation that's a completely different vibration. Nikki says an illusionary sense of control. Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. And that's what's perpetuated the whole battle of good versus evil, the battle of, who's right and wrong, the battle.
Right.
And then it's like, what if I transcend it and say, so what is there for me to do here? What is there for me to be? Right. And it could be something that has nothing to do, most likely, has nothing to do with all the pitter patter, chit-chatty fighting that's going on. Right.
Right. Well, and what is there for me to become?
Right. And so one of the things that we were looking at last week in terms of that, because it really did, I found myself, which is very unusual. I found myself like I had to walk away from the computer for several days because it was just, it was encompassing. It was rough. It was challenging, not rough, challenging. And so I just walked away, and, we talked about all this. And then what we were talking about, we were looking at where we are right now is this beautiful, very refined place. The potential is having this really beautifully refined place of walking a tightrope, right? And that's where we got to these fine lines, right? It was like walking a tightrope, which, by the way, is easy for us if we allow it, or and it's really allowing this full balance of these two of different things, of the 3D level and the higher consciousness level, right? So the biggest one that we talked about was that idea of knowing when to be and knowing when to do.
Right.
Because the ego wants to do. do, right?
Right.
Consciousness is being. So when we are, and we've talked about this a lot, what, for, I don't know, ever,
Right.
at least a year. When we do from being, it's a much different action than when we are doing to be, kind of thing, right?
Right.
We get
Right.
lost, and many of us just don't even be. We just continue to do in many cases in society and whatever. That's what we've gotten into the habit of embodied. It's just do to prove yourself, do to make yourself valuable, do to be this, do to be that, do to be happy, do to do to be successful, instead of knowing and being that already.
Right.
Doing.
Right. And your actions come from a whole different place. Your creations.
Yes.
You're doing.
Because then it all becomes conscious creation from
Right.
that being. Right.
Well, and it comes from that place of unconditional acceptance, meaning no separation of good and evil, dark light, black white, whatever words you want to put to it, and it makes that creation so much more powerful.
Right. And for us to, so we're at this really fine line of allowing this to resolve and complete itself as we can simultaneously are shifting to something completely different and new, right? Or
Right.
level. So it's one thing over another. It's an overlay, which we've been talking about for a long time too. And that's a fine line as well, because we're here and what it looks like is here, but we're also in a new place.
Right.
As
right.
the fear starts to fade away.
Right. Which creates the fear, which creates the anger, which creates the fray, which creates the confusion. And I mean, it's no wonder where we are.
Right. And so it's like taking measured steps, right? It's like being conscious and observant in every step of being and doing, right? And that is the being part. That's what we've been talking about. And it's so funny how underestimated it is, how completely underestimated it is, right? It's like, no, we've got to do. We've got to push. We've got to prove. We've got to blah, 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 right?
It's almost dismissed.
Yes. And it was funny because I had a conversation with somebody a couple weeks ago, and, they had this whole, and I started talking about this on my podcast last week, and it got like waylaid because of the conversation. But this is an important point. Maybe it was supposed to come back to today. So the conversation I've had, and I've had this many times, is, I have all this cornucopia of things, and look at me, look at how awful and terrible and, dramatic my life has been. Not me. I'm talking about somebody who calls me and wants a
right. Right.
And I'm like, okay. So then we know where to start. And they get really often turned off because I don't react to their drama, right?
You don't get sucked in.
I don't get sucked in, and I'm like, okay, great that you come. And what I always say is, it's great when somebody comes to me with a whole cornucopia of a platter of things that they're ready to look at and resolve, and they keep on. And like, it's funny, a lot of times they'll say to me, and I haven't been able, no matter what I've done, I can't let go of this. And I'm like, well, you can choose to.
Right. And chances are everything feeds back to one central core issue.
Right.
Which discounts the cornucopia.
Right. Completely. And then the ego is so attached to that illusion of identity, right? That martyr or whatever, or suffering, or however you want to put it, that they really, because what I'll ask when somebody comes to me with all of that is, I will say to them, okay, great. So here's the question I have for you is, are you ready to really let go of it?
Right.
And of course, like 9 times out of 10, what do they say to me? Oh, of course I am. That's why I'm doing this.
Right.
Like, are you?
That's what I've been trying to do.
Yes, I've been trying. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? Because when you let go of it, your ego's going to say, who am I without all of this?
Right.
Because all this makes me special.
Right.
So we have all that going on right now. So anyway, so the point with that is, because I say, okay, We know where to start. We'll just ask what's the most important, the priority to bubble up to the top. That's the easiest thing. A lot of times they discount it because they think that I'm not dramatic enough, right?
Right.
Or I don't claim. So, and this is where we start getting to these lines, right? The ego versus consciousness, and we get lost in it because what happens with these big waves of fear and anger that are going on now, because we have a lot of change going on as everything crumbles as it has been into
Right.
what it will be, right? To transform into what it will be, you have a lot of ego fighting. Oh no, I'm going to be the martyr and I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this world.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is why?
Right.
It didn't serve us to begin with where we got to. I mean, we did. It got us to the point of the lessons, completing lessons we needed to complete, right?
Right.
So how about we focus on moving to what's next and what's moving forward instead of what's behind us?
Right. Right.
And that also is a very fine line
Right.
because it's balancing the full moving forward, right? We think of as future, right, versus
Right.
behind us, which we think of as past, when really all that exists is right this.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's that fine line that you're in the middle of, right?
Right.
So there was that, right? There's also, many things that what we were talking about. I'm glad we wrote notes on this because it's sort of like has changed a lot since we first talked about it.
Right. Right.
Another thing that's been really in terms of these conversations that we're having, and then I guess we'll just evolve it to whatever we need to, is we are all here for this party. This is what we were born for. This is what we are here for today.
Right.
So we did a bunch of things to ensure that we would be here because we signed up to be here, right?
Right.
Now, in the
Right.
beginning of all this, right, this is what we started talking about. In the beginning of all this, for me, I kept on getting called to counsel, which is so weird, like years ago. And it was like, I'd be in meditation and be like this, like, etheric tapping on my shoulder. And I'd be like, yeah, oh, you're still up for what you committed to doing or being. And I'm like, I guess, yeah, I'm here, right? So, and then that happened multiple times. And the more I did it, the more I was like, yeah. So the thing that you and I started talking about last week was a couple of things, though, that are so important in moving forward that we understand, right? One is to really be in this place of presence so much and to be so clear and trusting of our own guidance.
Right.
That when the moment comes that the guidance says to do something that is so completely out of character for us, right? Or so completely out of what our lives look like maybe it's just to just leave, go someplace now,
Right.
That we can trust that, right? And so what we know, and we know this at some level, we know this, the more conscious we are, that we can feel it. We felt it for a long time. So the thing that you started talking about was the observance of being emotionally detached, right? Because at some level you feel like for a long time you felt like, yeah, why get attached to this?
Right. Exactly.
And so
it's already feeling temporary.
yeah. And so then you feel like, you have to be distant. You can't be, and the thing is, because we tend to get attached with the ego, there's that other ego versus consciousness, right?
Right.
So there's that benevolent detachment of being connected and yet being non-attached, right?
Right.
Saying, I love this. So what we were talking about as an example was like attracting our soul tribe, that we allow us to be, to be these connections at this pure heart level, right? where we can have these authentic expressions with each other and discussions and experiences and all that kind of stuff, so that while we are muddling through what's collapsing to the ego that says, oh, okay, I can do this because, you know, it's easier, right? The perception.
Right.
But then we want to get attached to that, right? You know, there comes all the, I don't know, I was watching Outlander last night. Yeah, there comes all the, oh, you know, I love you, don't leave me, don't, you know, I don't want to live without you, and all that kind of stuff. But that's not even romantic. That's just romantic. I'm talking about like our soul tribe, which is a very important circle of ours right now in terms of frequency and vibration and resonance and stuff like that. So, and that's the other thing, like Gloria and Nicole are writing about, you know, accepting the unknown, which is scary to the ego. And that's what we do to comfort ourselves, like surround us with people who understand us
and are familiar.
Yeah, and feel familiar and comfortable and, you know, like home kind of thing, right?
Right. Reassurance.
Until it's time to do it differently.
Right.
Right. And there's another fine line, right? It's being connected, fully, wholeheartedly connected and not attached.
Right. Right.
Which is,
which, you know, that feels like it's similar to something that came up for me over the weekend, which was the knowing, being so firm and understanding and connected to my guidance doesn't mean that I have to be distracted by other people's guidance and what they're guided to do. There's no one right answer.
Well, it's all the right answer, right?
Exactly.
When it's true guidance.
No right or wrong journey.
Right. Which we have a hard time comprehending too, because we're so used to judging.
And we're so committed to ours.
Yeah.
So you find comfort in other people being committed to the same thing because it's like, oh, then it really is right.
Which is ego. Right. See how that snuck in there? It was so sneaky. Yep. So yeah, so Nicole says, connected without attachment really resonated with me. Thank you. Yeah, and that's a really important one, because we are so attached. We have been so attached to the way we live. Look at what we did. We pulled it out from under our feet so that we can give ourselves a breath to say, oh, well, what if I did this differently? What if I was, you know, being completely different?
Right.
And so that was what we were talking about. Was it last week or the week before no, I think it was last week. Not sure. Are we ready have we cocooned enough to move forward? Have we looked inside? That was last week. Okay.
Right.
So,
which, you know, comes back to what Gloria says about the trust is that's the strength comes from the trusting.
Yeah. Yep. And so, and that's one of the most challenging things we have, especially because the ego takes such pride in judging, defining, which is a judgment, right? Defining based on known factors.
Right.
That's what the ego does. And so when you say, okay, guidance is something that's completely out of context, completely out of something I can define, the ego goes, what? We can't do that.
Right.
That could be dangerous because it's unknown.
Right. Right.
You know, right. It's that whole Marie Curie, we fear what we don't understand. And when we come to that point of, we might just not remember it all. Well, we don't remember it all yet. And when we accept the fact that we know at some level of consciousness, then we can trust better.
Right. Right. Yeah.
What was the other one? Oh, right. And so the other thing, and this is connected too, it's another line of that attachment, the connected versus attachment. So we have agreed to cross paths with those, in many cases, who we are deeply connected to, right? or find it easy to be deeply connected to, right? So whether it's our spouses, our friends, or our kids, or whatever, we chose them as anchors in a way of not holding us and tethering us here, but keeping us along this track until it was time to move into what we're forming next.
Right. Right. And that can even be your pets.
Oh yeah. In many cases it is. Right.
Right. More so than people.
Right. I hear
The
more
level of responsibility is different.
Right. And so we say, oh, well, I can't do this because of this. I can't do this because I have to take care of the dogs. I can't do this because I have to, I have my kids and my kids aren't full grown yet. My kids aren't out of school yet, or, my husband or my wife isn't ready for this or that, and so we make all these excuses as their distractions.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we've fallen into the ego side, which is what we've typically done, it's well, I created this anchor, this connection, and now it's become an attachment.
Right.
And I let it distract me and limit me.
Right.
I use excuses to not do what I'm guided to do all the time to accommodate what I believe I have to do to stay attached.
Right.
And so when you look at it that way, you're like, oh, huh. Right.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah, because then when you let go, and I've noticed that over the years with me, is when I've let go of those tethers and not made decisions based on others and what others think of me, or what they're going to think of me doing something, or they're going to be upset. The thing was that I just became like, okay, if guidance came in to do or be something, then that's what I started coming in to be and do. And there were like little nuances, and you're right, the pets sometimes are the most distracting.
Right.
Because we have such heartstrings connected to them, right?
Well, and they have that sense of dependency of, well, who's going to take care of me?
Right. Well, and
we reciprocate by taking care of them.
Right. Well, and then the thing is, well, there are others in my household. Others can take care of them. There are others, and stuff like that. So then that martyrdom starts going away.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it becomes okay, well, then and the more I started doing that, the more I allowed myself to be free to listen to guidance over anything, the more everybody around me just learned to accept it.
Right. I think the more confidence and the more stick to itness you have, then it's almost like they have no choice.
Well, they don't.
And they just adopt that understanding.
Yes. So Gloria says life then becomes freeing and so much easier.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, and our being becomes so much easier because then we're not tethered.
Right.
All these directions.
Right. And we allow that to be natural instead of having to always be concentrating and redirecting ourselves to that.
And so, we say it and it seems easy, right? But it's such a habit.
Right. Well, it's a way of life.
Right. And so we keep on thinking things like, why? Well, like if I do this or if I don't do this, then I can't do this. If I don't have this job, I can't pay my bills. Well, guess what? A lot of people don't have that job now and they can't pay their bills and they're somehow figuring it out. Or they're not, and they're having to change their life because it's time to move forward from that stuck place of perpetual tethering.
Right. And to take ownership of what they've created and use that lesson or that example as to see, you created this, so you can create anything. Get clear on what it is you really want to create.
Yes. Right. And what's interesting is watching, observing what's going on around in the 3D. And you have so much now arguing, right? Oh, should we stay home? Should we go out? Da, 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 da. You know, you have these factions now that are opposite, becoming bipolar very quickly, and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And it's and then it's like, well, stop, because now you're using that as a tether, right, to distract you from looking inside.
Right. Right. Well, and those that took the time and did the self-focus and work are now being tested. Can you keep that focus and still have this going on out here?
Right. Right. Right, because I was quite shaken last week that I was even affected by it, which is weird because it's usually it was such an oddity for me. So it's like, yeah, okay, well, because it's almost like the volume has been turned up to 8 and it's going to 12 soon. So can you stay focused? Can you
Right.
stay centered? Can you stay on that line? Can you allow yourself to be embodied and still attending to your higher consciousness purpose?
Right. Which that's really the question.
Yeah. And if you can't, well, then spend some more time going inside.
Right. Right.
And observe yourself more as to, well, why am I still holding on to this? We have a lot, and it's going to be, like I said, I feel like it's going from 8 to 12 very soon. So,
I agree.
and I see, like, because I see this, I started seeing the whispers of another layer starting on, which is all the saviors wanting to step up now. I know how to save the planet. I know how to save us. I know how to do, like, and it's, whether it's spiritual or whatever. And it's like, I can do this. I alone can do this. And it's like, we are here to do this.
Right. Right.
And so that's the third level. That's going to get even louder. So the key being, Nikki says it's about a 20 year. Yeah, I keep on seeing a bunch of stuff about Michigan, man. I saw
Right.
something over the weekend. I was like, dang, I had no idea. Yeah. And I was glad I saw it after I had been away from everything for a couple of days, because I was like, wow. Yeah. There was other stuff, not just Michigan, but Montana had some weird stuff going on, which is sort of calmed down, it seems, where they, like, there was a flyer that went out about putting armbands on if you've been, like, in quarantine for 14 days. That was the only way you'd be allowed to a store. I was like, oh my God, right? You feel that cringe of, oh, are you kidding me? Which was,
and we'll put this little symbol on it.
Oh, it hurt my third eye. And then it was like, oh, well, 3 days later, the government's like, oh, no, we didn't mean that.
Well, now they have apps for that. To prove that you have the immunity.
Oh, well, so that's what I'm saying is it's really ramping up. Okay, so Nikki says it's gone to 20. So 20 it will be then.
Right.
So can you stay above? So Nikki, kudos to you for choosing to hold the consciousness
right
at this time, and everybody who has, right? But the thing is, we're all there, and that's really what our purpose is. Our purpose is to transcend and hold this space in a place of connection and love without distraction and tethering and ego.
Right.
And that's what we've been leading. That's what's been leading us. That's what has been leading up to here. And now's the game. Now's the party. Like, now's the time for us to really hold the space, because regardless of what looks like it's going on, it's almost like we're holding. Nikki says, I'm good, just hanging out and doing my thing.
Right.
That's all you can do, right?
That's right.
And Gloria too, exactly. Yes, all of our friends in Michigan. But also, like I said, in other places, it's all over the place. But yeah, we do have hot spots. And so it's like, okay, all of us, like, there's so many things that are out there about, healing the world and everything else. It's not about healing the world. It's transcending the world. It's transcending the world as we know it, to ove it in that vibration of love and wholeness and connectedness, so that we can.
And I feel like, I've evolved to the point where I feel like when you heal something, that means that you judge it as being unhealed.
Right.
And so they're
wrong.
Right. Exactly. So there is no wrong. It's getting to that place of that wholeness within yourself.
Yes. Yes. And really, again, totally underrated and, overlooked.
Right.
And yet it is the key for all of us, is that coming into yourself, coming into your guidance, transcending in consciousness versus ego, and trusting and asking that question, as we said last week, and I just am continuing to say that, asking the question is, what is there for me to do, and what is there for me to be, and where is there for me to go, right, is what you said. Right.
Yep.
So it's like, take a breath.
Yeah.
Because, and keep on taking breaths, because yeah, this isn't over yet, not even close.
No. No, but I think as we become more practiced in this staying within and focusing on guidance, it will be easier. And I think as things get easier on that level, the speed of this whole thing will pick up.
Oh, there's the yawn. Yes. Well, it is already picking up, and it's going to get even faster, right? When we talked last week about getting on the roller coaster,
Right.
right. We're at that big hump, that first big hump. So,
yeah.
We can be through this. We can be through this.
Exactly.
It's not what we have to do.
Well, it is already picking up.
Ooh,
And it's
see my voice. That's like I even get the voice. Stop. My phone started making noise after I turned the sound off. That was weird. I was like, where's that voice coming from? Oh, my phone. Anyway. So yeah, there's the voice, right? So we have a lot of stuff, and what was interesting was last night at meditation, I was pulled into meditation at like 9 o'clock. I was like, yeah, I need to go now. And I just was like, oh, I dropped everything and just went, right? And what I saw was something that might have unnerved me like 6-7 years ago, but just felt perfect in what I saw.
Right.
And it felt perfect. And it was basically coming around after I saw it, and didn't react this time, because I did see a version of it 11 years ago. I did see a version of it. And at the time I judged it, and it scared me, right? So now I see it in a completely different light. I saw it again, which I didn't even connect. And then finally it was pointed out to me out there that, yeah, this is the same thing. Remember this? This is that. Right. And I was like, oh, okay. Completely different place, completely different place of consciousness.
Right.
So, because there's a lot more trust now, right? And not only trust, but bring it on.
Right. That's where I am.
So it's, and so we're going to be called to do everything. So this is like, we talk about all that stuff, the, realizing our divine note for the symphony, right? And so this is the importance of going inside and listening to that guidance, and staying in that guidance, and staying in love and wholeness versus exclusion, right? And hierarchy. Always check yourself with hierarchy. When you say, I am the only one that can do that, that is actually hierarchy, and saying I can and you can't, right?
Right.
So that's ego, right? If you say I'm right and everybody else is wrong, that's ego.
And that's not honoring everyone's journey.
Exactly.
Which is
so that's
what I'm wanting to do over the week.
Yeah, a couple of texts and you're like, try not to judge. Yeah. I found it so much easier to just work out in the garden this weekend. It was nice.
The weather didn't really cooperate for me to have that happen. I made the best of it.
So, oh, see, there's more yawns. It's the most powerful thing for us. It is the powerful thing for us to do. It is the empowered thing for us to do, is to get inside into our own wholeness, into our divine power, because that's where we tap. And to say, I came here to do this or be this, it's not wrong. Right? To say it in a way that it's me and nobody else, that's the ego part, right? Or that this is all I can do, this is all I'm focused on doing. Now, if guidance says this is what you focus on, that's fine. But when you say this is all I can do, right? Or this is what I have to do, or I can't not do, like, that's ego, right? So that's the fine line. These are the fine lines for us to start looking at, right? And so maybe the intention today, or the creation today, is to having that conscious, clarity, right? To be able to see those lines within us, within our actions and our being versus our doing, to step back before we do from the being, to say, okay, where in here could there be a trace of ego, right? Is there a trace of ego? Is there a trace of non-wholeness?
Right.
In judging others, in judging myself, in saying I can't or have to or must, or saying that others can't or have to or must, or saying that somebody is higher on the hierarchy than others. Let's wipe it all clean and say, what if we're all that? We're all that.
Right. And then special interest.
Yeah. Even if the ego wants to go, blah!
Right.
And even if everybody around us is doing that.
Yeah.
Even if everybody around us is completely immersed in the fear, or completely immersed in the anger, or completely immersed in the righteousness, that's one of the hardest ones for many of us to get past once we sort of get to this higher consciousness kind of thing, right? Judging the righteousness, which is righteous in itself, right? Nikki says my ego does that all the time.
Yep.
So here's the thing: we're all special. None of us are special, and all of us are special because we're all here as the divine embodied.
Right.
We're all here. Special. We are equally special, amazing, and infinite. Right. And if we took out all the expectations and definitions of what that's supposed to be, and I posted about that this morning, funny enough, I didn't even connect it at the time. But if sometimes when we say, this is what I came here to be, we actually limit ourselves because that's what we think, right? Right. But it's like, okay, so maybe that was just a step toward what you came here to really embody. Right. But you're stopping yourself because you're saying, well, this is what I came here to be. Well, that's what you came here to be last month or 5 years ago.
Right.
And now you're here to be this.
Right. And the fact that it's being put into words limits it even more.
Right. So the creation is what? Being able to be conscious clarity on those fine lines and where we're tilting toward the ego, right? And to stay, because we're still embodied individually, right? So we're still having an ego experience, and the ego's evolving as well. Well, the ego as we know it here is evolving as well. And around the multiverse, there's ego everywhere. So as we transcend, and work, and not work on, as we get into the practice and remembrance of transcending that, then it becomes easier to see it. But the first step for us is to really step out of it, to step out of the immersion in it.
Yeah, the detachment.
Yeah. So all little tiny things to look at this week.
Lots of little things.
So let's set ourselves in that place to be able to have conscious clarity and ease and flow, right? Without it having to hit us upside the head, right?
Right.
In a place of acceptance and love. And to allow that expression of our being beyond all of those expectations and transcendent. Oh, to be able to stay transcendent. That was what we did a share on Thursday, right?
Or was it Friday?
I think it was Thursday.
I think it was. No, it was Thursday.
It was Thursday evening. We thought it, because we kept on saying we thought it was Friday, remember?
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, let me go back and look at that really quick.
Yeah, I have written down refinement of benevolent detachment.
Yeah. Okay. And activating. Oh yeah, that's a whole other discussion. I don't know if it is. I'm like, whoa, wait. Okay. And activating ourselves. Activating. Okay, so it was like what we saw was there. Well, what I remember when I went and I saw that we had that one pearl thing, right? That we had in this problem place that manifests in our bodies. That is the activation of almost freeing ourselves of that tether to the identity at the 3D level, right? Because it was what we used to anchor us for a while too. One of the things we used to anchor us, right?
Yeah, within ourselves versus external, like pets and family that we talked about.
Right, and pulling that out and allowing it to reintegrate into this holographic DNA and, higher consciousness and all that kind of stuff. Which, yeah, well, that was really in a nutshell after that whole discussion. But
yes, that was.
We'll see it when we go out there. How's that?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So allowing that to activate and letting that, because once we get that out of that and being embedded and we incorporate it back into the flow of the higher consciousness, holographic DNA, right, of what we're creating, then everything just sort of falls into place. And then yeah. So let's allow all that in an easy, fun, flowing kind of way. Simple as that. Ready? Okay, you ready?
I am.
All right, let's go. Oh, way out there.
Yeah. That was nice though.
Yeah. It was a little bit bumpy in the beginning, and then it smoothed out. Yeah. Do you see anything?
Kind of like shedding skins. Stepping out of them, allowing them to fall away. It made the exchange, it was the word that came to me, of energy from a different level, seamless.
Nice. Yeah, I don't even remember what I saw now. Interesting. All right. So this week, everybody look at those lines within yourself, look at those areas where we tend to fall into ego in our consciousness, and to just commit ourselves to being and transcendent and wholeness, which sounds so easy, and yet in practice, something for us to habituate ourselves with. So
trust and acceptance.
Yeah. And I know we've said this a bajillion times before, but it's even more important now than ever.
Right.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next time. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah C. Avagnoni
signing off on this week's Ascending World. Have a good one.